This week, the Oklahoma Municipal League hosted a virtual meeting at the request of Governor Stitt to inform municipal leaders about recent changes to CARES Act funding and FEMA disaster funding procedures. Speaking on behalf of the governor was Secretary Mike Mazie, Secretary John Budd, and Mark Gower, Director of the Office of Emergency Management. Due to the important content, OML recorded the meeting in order to make it available to all municipalities. In addition to the video content, we have provided a copy of the PowerPoint presentation prepared by the Governor's Office and used in this video. You can find a link to the presentation on our website, oml.org. If you have any questions after reviewing the video, please contact me directly at mfina@oml.org or by phone at 405-528-7515.
Some very important information today for you on the CARES Act funding. I know this has been an issue with our municipalities and trying to get everybody signed up and being able to submit their applications to get reimbursements. So today, hopefully that can answer a lot of questions. They have some things that they want to talk to you about, and then at the end, we'll see how well we can do this and stay organized and see if we can take some of your guys' questions. If we don't get to all of your questions, if you will just send them to me at OML, we'll make sure that we get it to the governor's office and have them answer, and we'll get back to you guys. So one last time, please, if you're not speaking, go ahead and mute your line if you would. And then I will go ahead and turn it over. I don't know which one of you three want to start, but I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Mike. I'll get us started off. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and all the hard work that you're doing out in Oklahoma. My name is Mike Mazie. I'm the Governor's Secretary of Budget, and on behalf of it and our Chief Operating Officer, John Budd, and our Director of Emergency Management, Mark Gower, we welcome you to today's session, and we really appreciate you spending some time with us. We know during the COVID pandemic and the rollout of CARES Act dollars, everything has been happening at a very fast pace. We've received very important instructions from Governor Stitt to move with all possible speed to get relief and help out to the folks of Oklahoma in lots of different manners, and you're a very, very important part of that. We've had to make some adjustments along the way, which is the purpose for today's call, and we hope that in the process we're giving you more certainty and flexibility. So we're going to try to answer questions today by one. How did this new allocation model come to pass? What are some of the best practices for your particular approach to our portal system, and what and why are we having some of the lines, as well as some updated information from FEMA, what's happening with the Office of Emergency Management. So to do that, I'm going to share a screen with you and introduce our incredible Chief Operating Officer of the state, who's brought us great leadership on the CARES Forward team and building a process by which we get relief dollars out to Oklahoma. And hopefully you can see my screen now. And with that, I'll turn it over to John Budd, Oklahoma's Chief Operating Officer.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be on the phone with you. We've been working on CARES Act funding for a couple of months now. We've tried various approaches to try to make sure we're pushing money out to the cities and counties. Hopefully this will work now. We've definitely had some disbursements, but we want to make sure that these monies are being deployed out in our municipality. So anxious to kind of go through some information with you and answer your questions. I think, Mike, before we proceed further, is Mark Gower also on the line just to introduce himself?
Yes, Secretary Budd, this is Mark Gower. So I'm here, the state's emergency management director. Been here for a little over a year and a half. Looking forward to meeting all of you, working with some of you very closely with some of our recent and most past disasters, but looking forward to going through a little bit of how things might be a little bit different with this current COVID DR 45. So looking forward to talking today.
Okay. So Mike, I'll go through a little bit of the slide work here, and obviously you jump in or you can walk next door and punch me if you want to be talking on any of these things. So we changed our model to an allocation model to get more clarity out to cities and counties. Cities and counties now can
go ahead and get off. I got, yeah.
Guys, please mute your line if you're not speaking.
So we changed this approach really for a few reasons. We were not pushing money out quite as quickly in the old model where you were basically asking for things after the fact. The other struggle we had, which was interesting, is we had creative ideas coming from the cities and counties, but we said, you know what, if your city does this, we cannot do this all across the state. So we don't have the money to do that program for every city and county across the state. So eventually we just came back to an approach where we said, you know what, we should allocate on the basis of population. It's the fairest way to do this. And if one city wants to pay for PPE and another one has a specific other need that they want to fulfill, that's okay. We're trying to put power back into the cities and counties as to how they use the funds. We based our formula on $77 per capita. We looked around at what other states were doing. We saw the Texas approach seemed to be working pretty well, and they were at a $55 per capita number. So when we did the math, we said we like that Texas model, but we think we can get a little bit more out to the cities and counties. We used the 2019 census data, which was the closest data we had. And this is really to try to give you more certainty and flexibility to capture the money. So you know how much is allocated to you. I think you all should have some idea as to what the legitimate expenses are, although we can certainly talk about that. And then you can go ahead and get those funds. We are still bound by the risk clawback from the federal government. So we still do have to do this. They still have to be legitimate expenses. We can't backfill budgets. There are still those guidelines, but I think at least the certainty should allow you to move forward with more confidence. So some examples that we have for things that you can spend the money on would include your payroll for public health and public safety personnel since March 1. That to me is a very logical place to start so that you can get the funds back to your cities and use them from there. If you have payroll costs for other folks that have been working on COVID-related activities, that's legitimate. PPE, COVID-related cleaning, these sorts of things are all legitimate expenses, and they're the sorts of things that almost every city and county has had to go through. Mike, do you mind popping back up one slide just real quick? We didn't talk about we did not talk about this, but we've paid out so far out of the 250 million about $18 million, and we've approved another 5.5 million to be paid out. We're reviewing another 40 million. The team here will work as quickly as possible, but obviously we still have a long way to go. If you add those three things together, it's about $60 million, and it's our intention to get that 250 out to the cities and counties. So please do get your expenses in. We'll turn it around as quickly as possible. Maybe Mike, do you want to skip down to the deadline page? And then Mike, do you want to go through this with them? You may be muted because I can hear you through the wall, but not on my computer.
Sorry. Thank you, John. We do have some important deadlines that are critical because, one, we have a congressional deadline of December 30, and then we, on the one hand, want you to have as much time as possible to get your dollars and have flexibility with them. On the other hand, we have to have some time in the last month or two to deploy dollars towards areas of highest need. So because of the shift to this new formula, we ended what had normally been a first 10 days of the month window for submitting requests to the portal. We lengthened that to August 24th. We're going to close that temporarily, if you will, until the 1st of September. So we have a little time to catch up on what fortunately has been a very high level of financial activity that many of you in your communities are now inputting to the system. When you implement, or I should say submit, a financial activity because you've gone through the important process of getting credentialed and filling out sub-recipient agreements, after you submit a financial activity, you are then provided a risk assessment form. From a compliance standpoint, we have to have this in place for our reporting and eventual audit for the entire state for the Office of Inspector General. So we really need you to get those done by September 15th. We have over 200 plus municipalities that have gone through the credentialing process, but we only have about 80 some of these risk assessment forms done. So we cannot distribute funds to you until those risk assessments are done. And then we're going to close the portal on November 1st. So we have 2 or 3 weeks, actually, maybe even a month, to get all of our work done to get the money out to you. And then hopefully the governor and the CARES Forward team will then have a full month to assess what are the highest priority needs going forward. For example, we want to have some money left over at the end of the day as we head into winter months for additional capacity for hospital beds if there is a virus surge that occurs into the flu season. So some of the important deadlines and the rationale behind those. Brandy Manick is on the line with us. She is our Director of Budget Policy and one of our key leaders in the CARES Forward team. Brandy, is there anything else we should mention about the deadlines? I want to make sure everyone is aware that you're on the line along with Carrie on our project team because as we've given you this, I can't seem to get the slide to move now, but on the previous page we gave you a email, and I wanted you to know who gets those emails when you need some help. Brandy, could you say hi to everyone and how you and Carrie have been trying to receive information and be available for our folks that are working through the portal system, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. We do have the CRF help email. I am the one that monitors that. Often questions that I get from there, I will loop Carrie in on those so that she can help respond. So responding, if you have Carrie's direct email or my direct email, you can also reply to those. But the CRF help email also gets to me. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is also as soon as you have approved financial activities and are getting your risk assessments done, at the same time, I'll be reaching out to you to lock down a vendor location for you that has appropriate banking information so that we can make sure that your CRF reimbursement goes into the proper bank account. And what we find is that every city and county has numerous vendor locations associated with the same vendor ID, so we have to break out which one is appropriate to send the payments to. So that's all I had.
Thank you, Brandy. And with that, we want to introduce Mark Gower, our Executive Director of OEM, who you had a hello from earlier. He's going to offer some best practices to utilize FEMA dollars. So between the FEMA dollars and the CARES Forward dollars, or I should more specifically say the Coronavirus Relief Fund dollars, you can maximize usage of federal funds for your communities. Director Gower?
Yes, thank you, Secretary Mazie. And as said before by both Secretaries Mazie and Budd, our core focus here at Emergency Management is to help guide you through the process and make sure that we can get money out on the streets as fast as possible. As an example, when this started, we worked with FEMA to go back to the back disasters and work all previous disasters to see where we could accelerate payments, utilize some of the FEMA processes to bring streamlines in, and just over $30 million has been pushed out to the streets in past disasters, as well as an additional $8 million to your emergency management performance grant programs if you have EMPG in your emergency management program, to help you weather whatever issues that you're having from a fiscal standpoint. So as we work through this process, as Secretary Mazie said, if you have items that are eligible for what is going to be described to you as FEMA Category B for emergency protective measures, please work with your local emergency manager to make sure you can get those costs filed under FEMA. So first, I'm going to start with a short recap of the program. So on April 5th, 2020, the President declared Oklahoma for the COVID-19 pandemic, or what you will hear us call DR 4530. So in FEMA language and in the White House language, they call this disaster 4530, DR 4530, with an incident period that's starting on January 20th. So it's different start date than where your CARES funds eligibility. So any emergency protective measures that you've put in place starting January 20th to continuing will be eligible. OEM has added a resource page on our website where you can find FEMA documents, fact sheets about this disaster. And to find this information, visit our website at oem.ok.gov. That's oem.ok.gov, and click on FEMA Coronavirus Disaster Guidance. Also, additional FEMA COVID-19 information can be accessed via FEMA's website at fema.gov and clicking on their COVID-19 link. To get started, we recommend applicants watch the recorded applicant briefing, which are located on our website on the FEMA Coronavirus Disaster page that I just mentioned. It will give you instructions on how to file. It will provide you a walkthrough on how to become registered and to become an applicant and what you will need. This disaster 4530 includes public assistance for Category B for emergency protective measures, direct federal assistance, and as well as limited other needs assistance for the President's recent Lost Wages Assistance Grant that we just got approved. The first step in seeking reimbursement for costs is to submit a request for public assistance, or RPA. To submit an RPA, applicants must have access to the state's disaster grants management system, that is ok.emgrants.com. ok.emgrants.com. You can contact your local emergency manager about this system and coordinate any reimbursement request through them. If you have someone working on CARES filings, make sure you're working with your local emergency manager to prevent duplicative expenses being filed under FEMA and under CARES. Currently, there's no RPA deadline like there normally is with a disaster that has been set out for the COVID-19 declaration. The incident period currently still remains open. The incident period determines if a particular work activity will be eligible for FEMA reimbursement. FEMA has advised that it will close the incident period when the national public health emergency is allowed to expire. So under the FEMA Public Assistance Program, you have small projects and that has a minimum threshold. So any project under $3,300 will not be eligible. You will need to bundle that with another project. Anything that is a large project that is over 131,100 will have a different project approval process. Small projects go through the FEMA CRC, and as the moment that they're approved, the funds are obligated and paid. Large projects goes through FEMA CRC, but they're formulated differently, and it requires additional documentation. So best practices. FEMA requires backup documentation for all projects, especially this one. We are being told this CARES funds, as well as this FEMA disaster, will be the most audited disaster in the history of disasters. It is important that applicants maintain a logical filing system and maintain supporting documentation for each project for 7 years after the disaster closes, even if you do not have to submit that documentation to FEMA right now. This includes purchases made, the policies you used, your payroll documents, your timekeeping records, and detailed project documentation to support your reimbursement request. FEMA public assistance reimbursement items are limited to emergency protective measures. FEMA defines these items as measures taken by a community before, during, and after a disaster to eliminate or reduce an immediate threat to life, public health, or safety, or significant damage to improved public or private property. Items submitted to FEMA for reimbursement must be related to COVID-19 and meet this FEMA definition. For example, purchasing PPE for first responders to work with individuals who may have COVID-19 would be eligible. Purchasing PPE for city employees to collect utility payments from the public would not be eligible. If you have questions about the eligibility of items before you buy them, please contact your local emergency manager and we can work with them and you to help you identify the answer you need. Submit items for reimbursement in logical groupings for projects. For example, you can group PPE orders for a couple weeks, a month, a quarter, or so forth. You can group them together as one project, but make sure that you try to keep it underneath the large project threshold. Keep it under that $131,000 threshold. Separate complex items for projects. For example, purchasing equipment could require additional information in comparison to simply purchasing PPE. So you would not want to include your PPE in there with your large equipment purchases. And finally, grouping all reimbursements items will cause a project to take significant time to be formulated. It will have to go through this FEMA CRC and they will dissect it all and will take forever. So depending on the size, grouping all items together could add additional administrative requirements and delay reimbursements. So use the FEMA and states grants management system to provide documentation, ok.emgrants.gov or .com instead of emailing or mailing the documentation to OEM. Paper gets lost, paper gets shuffled, so let's use the electronic process. It will expedite your ability to get your reimbursements in quicker. And above all, ask questions. All OEM staff are here to help you obtain the best answer possible. FEMA has been continually updating their eligibility guidance, and we want to encourage you that if you have any questions, please reach out to your local emergency manager, and we will coordinate with them or through them, and we will walk with you through this process. The last thing is once the 75% federal share for your project has been obligated, OEM will apply for the CARES funds for your remaining 25% for the COVID-19 disaster. And that's all I have to present pending questions.
Thank you, Mark. Mike, that's what Secretary Budd and Director Gower and I wanted to present. So I'll turn it back over to you for any questions or discussions you would like to direct to our team.
Okay, let's do it. I do have one question that was submitted prior. There's been some confusion over the payroll, reimbursement of the payroll of public health and public safety personnel since May 1st. Is that all public health and public safety payroll, or does it have to be directly related to COVID expenses?
Yeah, this is Brandy. So I'll take that, and I'll give you just a little bit of background. So when the Treasury first came out, they said that any payroll that was substantially dedicated was eligible for reimbursement. Well, substantially dedicated was fairly vague. So they came back later in some of their guidance and said public safety and public health are assumed to be substantially dedicated by nature of their work. So, so public safety and health payroll, since from March 1st on, are eligible to be reimbursed, no matter what they were working on. So now the other, so in your city city halls and county administrative offices, what we have determined at the state to be as substantially dedicated is if a person spent 50% or more of their time within a payroll on COVID-related activities.
Randy, say that last part one more time so we're clear on the 50%. I think that there's a little confusion there too.
Yeah, sure. So anything that's not public safety or public health, everything else, if a person, an employee works 50% or more of their time in a given pay period, whatever your pay period is, then those are considered substantially dedicated. So 50% or more of your time on COVID-related activities in a pay period.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, guys, let's see if we can do this orderly. If you have specific process questions that would fall under that you could send to the helpline or the help email, save them and use that. We have been using Brandy and her team since day one on this, and they are incredible and they get back to you very quickly. So if there's something that you can ask through that, save it for there. But at this time, let's go ahead and orderly. If someone speaks first, let them answer their question and then you jump in there. But well, let's go ahead and open it up for some questions here if we can. Just you're gonna have to unmute yourself. I muted everybody. Guys, we don't get golden opportunities like this to speak to two secretaries and the director of OEM anytime, every day. So if you got a question, now's the time.
Oh, and Mike, I just checked too. It looks like Carrie has been answering questions in the chat feature as well. Yeah. As we've been talking, so.
So maybe we already answered all of our questions. So okay.
I do. I have a very quick question. If you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I do have kind of a question that I don't know if this is a stupid question or not, so bear with me. If the funding is allotted at $77 per capita, but you're giving the monies to both counties and cities, what about, how is that going to be distributed? If obviously a city has 1,000 citizens, then they would get $77,000, but they are actually in a county that has 30,000 people. So is that $77 going to be split between the county and the city, or is it going to be doubled? And I'll take your answer off the air.
Well, and I was going to say, Carrie, you worked a lot on that particular formula. Do you mind jumping in and answering that question?
Sure. Okay. So what we did to come up with the allocation method is we started with the county population first, and then we back out the city populations to determine what their allocation is. The remaining amount for unincorporated people living in the unincorporated areas for that county, that goes to the county.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, what other questions do we have? Well, they're making it easy on you guys. All right. Before we end this, I would like to have a quick discussion because I say we, the mayors and the city managers on the line, we have been working with our congressional delegation, specifically with Senator Inhofe and Senator Langford, and we got the impression that if there was a stimulus bill, there probably wouldn't be additional funding for municipalities and counties, but it sounded like potentially the Democrats and the Republicans were on the same page on allowing up to 25% of the fund to be used for budget stabilization, and then also that they were going to extend the dates out that we can use the funds. Has any one of you from the state level, have you heard any more on that or have any update on what potentially could happen and what changes we could expect?
Yeah, so we have heard some of those same things too, but and then always followed by there's a lot of gridlock around this particular bill. The last one of the last versions that we saw said, you know, in order to use 25% on budget stabilization, you had to spend, I think it was 15 or 25% on cities and counties. So there was that provision in there. But again, we have heard a lot, but we've also heard that it's pretty tied up and we may not be able to expect any resolution till in the month of September sometime. So I wish I had more clarity on that, but I don't have any right now.
No, that's fine. As long as we're hearing the same things that you guys are hearing at the state, but that was that seemed like of all the potential changes that could happen to the CARES Act funding, those seem like the only two that the Democrats and Republicans were actually on the same page on. So we just assume that those might be the only two things that happen. So that Randy Ross, president of the Municipal League, unmuted himself. Randy, did you have a question?
Yes. Can you hear me, Mike?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, great. On the police and people working on that, when the funds get distributed, if we don't use all of it for our share, what happens?
If the city doesn't use all of the funds that are distributed,
right?
So since we are only doing these on a reimbursement basis, you've already spent the dollars. So once you get them back, you can put them wherever, and we're done. So okay. So that's fine.
All right, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay, guys, other questions?
Our facial coverings.
I got Bria Clark from Norman.
Okay. Has there been any progress on making the mass purchase of facial coverings reimbursable so we can provide them to our residents?
I'm sorry, the eligibility of face masks?
Yes, as a reimbursable expense.
Yeah, yes. Face masks are an eligible expense and to be reimbursed.
Thank you.
Sure.
Gary, this is Michael Coe from City of Lawton. I thought for masks to be reimbursable, it had to be for certain populations. As I read the language, I believe it described as folks that were in certain situations or had disabilities or something along that line. I didn't think it could be used to reimburse masks just generally for your population.
So FEMA, so I think we're talking about, and Mark, please jump in here. I think we're talking about the difference in FEMA eligible expenses and CRF eligible expenses. So FEMA, I believe, has some parameters around purchasing PPE. Coronavirus Relief Fund does not. Is that right, Mark?
Yes. So for the FEMA emergency protective measures, it's going to have to be for your basically your public safety, your public health style frontline workers that are doing interaction with COVID-19 from a public safety generally or public health perspective. So there is some quantifiable limits from what FEMA will reimburse for PPE. But there is one thing that if you're not tracking, you might start tracking it. There's a congressional bill out there. It's not yet passed. It's been proposed, and it's called Masks for All. And they're setting aside appropriation to buy masks for the entire populace of the United States, and then use the United States Postal Service to distribute. So that could be something that's coming. If you're for that, you might want to let your congressional delegation know your thoughts on that process.
So are they not reimbursable?
Bria, say that one more time, Bria. We didn't understand you.
So are they not reimbursable then?
Under FEMA, they would not be reimbursable, but I believe what Brandy is saying that if you're going to be buying PPE, it will be reimbursable.
That's
CARES
correct.
Act.
And you may have seen the governor and Mark and Superintendent Hoffmeister were distributing PPE for schools yesterday. Those include masks. So the distinction, I think, is between FEMA and CARES Act. Under CARES Act, there's no issue.
Okay,
Yes,
other
Mike.
question.
Yes, Mike, this is Huey Long, Spencer, Oklahoma.
Hey, Huey.
Question. Our community has been discontinued turning the water off for non-payment through this COVID period. Those bills that are accumulating in the arrears, are they subject to reimbursement under the COVID program?
Okay, guys, if you did understand that, what they're asking about was the outstanding water for non-payment. Are those going to be reimbursable through the CARES Act funding?
Hi, I think those would fall under revenue replacement, and that is not an eligible reimbursable expense under coronavirus relief fund. Oh, I'm sorry. But we could potentially work with Spencer on if they have public safety payroll or health payroll that potentially that would be reimbursable.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, going once, going twice.
Hey, Mike,
Yes.
can we make sure that the chat windows in here get somehow copied in and sent out? Because there's a lot of good information in here as well, and I don't have time to take notes on everything.
Dave, thanks for chiming in there. I will do my best. You've known me for several years, and you know I'm a little technologically challenged. We'll do our best. We'll best see if we can do that. I do believe things safe, so we will do our best. I promise.
Thanks.
Okay, guys. Anything else? All right, then let me go ahead and close this out with, again, I just want to thank both Secretary Budd and Secretary Mazie for taking the time to spend with us. Also want to thank Director William Mark Gower. It's really a privilege to be able to have the opportunity to speak directly with you. And we want to thank the governor for giving us this opportunity and really staying on our side through all of this. He's never threatened local control through this whole thing. And we really appreciate it. And then one last time, I'm going to give a shout out to Brandy. Brandy Manick has just really been a blessing for municipalities through this. Any of you guys that have worked with her, she has been very responsive, her and her team, and has really made a difference. So want to thank all you guys and want to thank everybody who participated today. So thank you, and we'll let you know when we do another one of these.